Okay. So just stand for a moment. Give yourself a few moments of your time. Simply stand and get a sense of your posture, the feeling of your weight in your feet. Not really trying to change anything at the moment. Before you can change anything, you've got to have a sense of what it is you're trying to change. And one of the things that we're doing, of course, is encouraging our thoughts to settle into our body. So there's a kind of dual process going on. We want to feel our weight settling into the ground, rooting down. Obviously, something we put a lot of emphasis on in Tai Chi, something we'll come back to. You want a sense of your body settling into itself, I suppose you could say. And your thoughts, your attention settling into your body. They're really just three sides of the same process. Try and just soften a little bit in your knees and your hips and begin to turn slowly. Turning in your hips, your waist, feeling that movement, moving your ribs, your shoulders, finally your arms, with your arms just hanging from your shoulders. As you start to move, you may notice areas that feel a bit stiff, a bit tight. Again, we're not trying to, at the moment, change anything, although you may find that the movement itself does actually start to change things. You may also find, those of you who are experiencing Tai Chi, that just the act of bringing your attention to part of your body or to your weight in your feet sort of stimulates a change that you didn't make it happen. It just happens. It's as though noticing something in your body, encourage the body to make the changes itself. This is where our intention has been trained to work on a kind of subconscious level. Not all of the intentions that we make are deliberate and up there in this kind of front of our brain. Certain things become habitual in Tai Chi. And this is an important part of the process, that we can begin to just experience the basic qualities of Tai Chi, maybe not as sharply, maybe not as clearly as when we're actively practicing, but just experience them in our daily lives as we move around doing whatever we're doing. You may notice a nice steady rhythm building in the movement, and that rhythm can resonate through your body, highlighting another important aspect of Tai Chi, which is the sense of connection. We develop a feeling, an awareness of our whole body as one unit, body and mind as one unit. If you've ever had one of those days, and I'm sure most of us have, where you can't quite remember where you put your keys down 2 minutes ago, and somebody comes along and says, "Yeah, okay." So yeah, I'm all over the place. You're sort of scattered, mind and body. There's a kind of unifying quality about Tai Chi that I think really does make a contribution to our sense of well-being. It's also an essential quality, really, for being able to perform these movements. When one part of our body is in motion, the whole body is in motion. And key to that, literally central to that, is this center part of the body between hips and waist. It's described as being like like the hub of a wheel. So, if you've got a bicycle or car or something like that, the wheel will have a hub, and when the hub rotates, the whole wheel moves, is moved by that rotation. So we begin to become aware of connections. This exercise, I think you'll probably notice it more going up your body, as I've said before, to your shoulders and to your arms, but you may notice changes in your legs. I think ideally with this exercise, we keep our weight 50% in each leg, but you may notice there's a tendency for the weight to move. It's something in the long term we would want to correct, but actually it draws your attention to the fact that when you move in the middle of your body, it has an impact on your legs. And that's both a mechanical connection, you could say, the muscles, bones linking up the body, nervous system as well, the fascia, but also to do with the actual movement itself. In the same way that a river will connect two towns on the riverbank, one below the other, or something like that. And in the same way that if you it's basic physics, isn't it? If you say go to sit in the bath, the water level rises because the fact that you're sitting at one end of the bath doesn't prevent the water at the other end of the bath rising. And so this leads us into notions of the energy, the movement, the flow of the energy through the body. Something that in Chinese medicine is essential to their understanding of the healing process. Looking for an improvement in the sense of movement, in the sense of harmony in that movement. Turn your hands palm forwards and just raise up a little bit. Another hand will go palm up. Try and do this without lifting the shoulders. And then just drop your hands down. Put one foot forwards. And now we are definitely moving in the weight, moving from foot to foot. But we can think of this in different ways, and they're all valid. It's very hard, and almost impossible, I think, to fully describe a movement. What we can do is look at different aspects of it. So if you think of this one, for instance, as a push from the legs, or some of you will be familiar with the idea that what we're doing is we're sinking down into the legs, so it's almost like you're bouncing out of that. Then we do that, and our center turns. It's a natural action for the center, usually turning in the direction of the foot that you're moving into. But that can also be reversed. When we bring our minds, our awareness actively into this movement, we also bring our intention into the movement, and intention gets focused through the center of the body. So if I'm on my back leg and I turn forwards, and the intention is to take my center forwards, then my weight will. One of the old writings in Tai Chi uses an interesting image referring to a kind of, well, really big, I suppose it works in modern terms, but kind of what I think of as an old style army, where they say that the mind is the commander, and you can imagine the sort of like the commander maybe standing on a hill looking out over the battlefield and directing the battle, directing the movements of the army. in that context, the center of the body is regarded as the banner. The banner would have been the visible marker for the people in the army. That when the banner moved in a certain direction, they would follow, and information would pass in both directions between banner and commander. So it's an interesting relationship to consider. Now change over. So with these initial exercises, although they're very, very simple, there's a great deal going on that we can start to just become aware of. And in a sense, I think bringing these things to the surface, we notice these things. Some of you watching this may well be experienced in Tai Chi, but remember, we kind of forget things. We revert to old habits of movement very, very easily. And so to start off with, and ideally to start the day, we give a little bit of time to just bringing back that awareness of basic principles. And then just shake out. With time and practice, you'll find that process is a relatively straightforward and often fairly quick one. It's often just a reminder. But we do lose that sense of it. The old habits of movement and posture that we've accumulated in our lives for one reason or another don't give up very easily. Okay, so coming back to the parallel stance, thinking a little bit more about this stance. Feet are hip width apart. So imagine parallel lines from shoulders to hips to feet, so that your body feels supported. If you're standing too narrow, it's almost like the hips haven't got direct support, shoulders haven't got direct support. That hip width can be slightly variable. You could measure it from the inside of your foot, and obviously that's going to give you a slightly, from the outside of your foot, it's going to give you a slightly narrower stance, and those straight lines would be down there. You could go, say, the middle of your foot, and the straight lines would go down in sort of the middle of the leg, or from the inside, giving a slightly wider stance. So there's a little bit of variation there. I prefer the slightly wider stance. You find all those variations within the Tai Chi system, and a lot depends on your particular body type and the way that you're familiar with this, the way that you practice and so on. Try and have your feet, your weight in your feet a little bit forward. This is exaggerated, but when I bring my weight, so there's more of my weight in the front half of the feet, you can see the angle that my body takes. In practice, you're only looking for about 70%, so it's a lot less than this, but I'm doing this so that you can see what I do next. Come a bit closer to the camera so you can see that. So I'm here. Often when we're in this position, we're leaning forward slightly. Our body will try to bring us back to the upright position in the quickest way. But quite often we find ourselves doing something like that. This is exaggerated, but pulling the shoulders back. What we actually want to do is to let the hips drop back, and that will level off the pelvis. And it's that dropping of the hips, drawing your shoulders back very gently, that brings us back to the upright position. So mostly, there's a couple of exceptions which we'll come to, mostly we're in this upright stance, but not straining to hold ourselves up. Now, let your hips drop back a little bit more, sinking down, and then feeling the legs expanding, feet pushing down into the ground, with your hips being pushed up, and then contracting, almost like you're bouncing up and down in slow motion on a trampoline. You sink down, you load the legs, and then push up. So the sinking down, rooting down is the name of the exercise we're about to do, is your body allowing gravity to pull you down a certain amount, and then feeling that from that sinking down, you're pushed up. So again, like on a trampoline, to get the energy that the trampoline can offer you to bounce you up into the air, you have to first drop down. So when we talk about rooting down in Tai Chi, we're trying to drop our weight, drop our center of gravity through the ground. And one of the really important outcomes of that is a greater stability. The lower your center of gravity, the more stable you are. But another one is that it is the source of this upward movement. So like a plant, when it grows out of the root doesn't come up. The root stays down, and the plant grows. It extends from the root upwards. So your body expands and contracts. And in both directions, we develop this strong sense of the root, and the stability when we do that. So when we come up, we're not trying to lift ourselves up. We're pushing from the ground. If I try and lift myself up, I instantly become less stable because I've lifted my center of gravity. And bring your hands around as though you're cradling the ball and pushing up. Let that expansion through the upper body, push your elbows out, bringing the ball up, and then sinking down. Imagine you're doing this in water. It's a very common image in Tai Chi. There's various things about that, but specifically with this exercise, if you were to push a ball down into water, if you're in a swimming pool or something, you wouldn't just push down with your arms. You try and drop your weight through the ball. Rooting down is the first sort of key thing that we would work on in Tai Chi. It is the root, the foundation for everything else. And this pattern of movement, the yielding to the pull of gravity, the sinking downwards, and the response from our body with the expansion, is one of the very important cycles of movement, cycles of energy that we work with in Tai Chi. Another aspect of that moving through water is the style of movement. If we stiffen up in water, it becomes very hard work and we don't make good progress. And so we quite naturally soften a little bit. We try and hold our joints a little bit loose, try not to stiffen up in the muscles. It's the same in the movements of Tai Chi. Now this time, same thing in your legs and your hips, but turn your hands out and come up either side of your body. This is called the wild goose. So the image could be of a bird in flight, if that's useful to you. Imagery is a really important aspect of the way that we work in Tai Chi, because our bodies are generally very responsive to it. But that doesn't mean that we have to focus too much on the images. If an image doesn't work for you, then don't sort of think that you failed or feel that you need to chase after it. The images are there to serve the postures and the movements, not the other way around. And there have been times when I've been offered images and they haven't worked. And sometimes I might recall them weeks or months or years later, suddenly realize that there is something in that image. But it's all in the interest of the actual movements. And then part in the clouds. So we use the images to enhance the movement. We don't use the images, we don't use the movements, I beg your pardon, to try and understand the images, because our interest is in Tai Chi. You can use Tai Chi to do that, but in the actual practice of the art, it's very much the first way. One more time. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky, letting your hands come down the sides and just on one side. Your elbow first, drawing your fingers up, then gradually your elbow dropping, your hand going up a little bit higher. Rotate and pull down. Your attention gradually shift to the other side. The same thing there, feeling that extension through the whole of your side of your body. Then you're plucking something off a tree, some sort of a soft fruit, like a plum or something like that. So when you wrap your fingers around, you're not gripping tightly. One more of these. So you sink down a fair way, but then just let yourself come up a little bit to this top position. A slight curve in your knees, feeling in your lower back, your hips and your buttocks overhanging slightly. So you can see here when I bring my weight forwards, that brings my knees above the balls of my feet. And when I let the hips drop back, it's like my hips are now more in line with my ankles. And this is the basic resting position. We go down further from that, but we don't come up from this center. Give your legs a shake. So sometimes in some of the exercises I've just been doing, there's going to be a further movement downwards. You get that sense of springiness of being pushed up. But even when we don't do that, in the next couple of exercises, we don't actually go down any further, but we do stay in that in that top position. And that's a position that allows for gravity to work more freely through our body. We're not blocking that movement, we're not straining against gravity. And it's a position that allows the upward movement. So again, we have that cycle of movement, that cycle of energy. And it's one of the most important kinetic energies that we work with in Tai Chi. There are others as well, other forms of energy, but that very strong physical energy, starting with yielding, allowing the pull of gravity to work through our body, is always present for us. So in that position, just try and just be aware of that sense of pull, that sense of overhanging in the hips that I described a moment ago. And then just recognize that although you're allowing gravity to pull your hips down, hopefully you haven't just collapsed. So there has to be a counter movement there. It's like if you, going back to the ball in water, if you get a ball or a block of wood and you push it down into the water, you immediately feel the buoyancy of the water pushing pushing back up. And in this particular position, it's in neutral position, that the downward movement and the upward movement are neutral to each other. They're equal to each other, but there's still very much sense of movement there. Bring your hands to your sides, and then following the upward movement, bring your hands up just a little bit above your head, and then slowly down. Hands are a little bit in front of your body. You don't want to gain feel the lengthening through your back and your spine as you do this. This time, let your elbows drop as you do this, so your hands go out to the side and back. And again, just to show you, my hands are slightly in front, so they're here, not here. And alternating those movements. And again, just feeling subtle change in your back, lengthening and then broadening alternately. So we've got two directions of movement, governed by this rhythm of expansion and contraction. And this time, as you push your hands out, just turn gently in your hips and your waist. And that changes the angle of movement of your arms. Turn back to the front. Turn the other way. And back. And then facing the front and pushing out. So 4 directions, pushing in 4 directions. Arguably, there's 5 directions because there's an expansion and it's always followed by the contraction. So we could argue that the 5th direction, which recurs, brings you back, brings your hands back to your center, brings your awareness back to your center. Once again, the turning in the middle of your body, affecting your arms, upper body, maybe again, might feel a slight change in your legs. Feel that nice steady rhythm between the expansion and the contraction, trying not to rush in either direction. Bring your hands back in, drop them down to their full length, and the next expansion pushes one arm out again, this time rotating outwards and up until it's just above your head, slightly in front again, and down. Imagine standing beneath an old doorway like you might get in an old church, in an arch, and just reaching out and sliding your hand around that arch. And then again, you can add a little turn here. Turn, that helps to draw your hand across your body a little bit. On the other side. And that's a turn. One more time. And then shake out. The next two movements take us out of that vertical line. It doesn't happen that often in these exercises that we do, but they're important exercises. I mentioned this idea of parallel lines going down. If you can imagine a third line going down from the crown of your head, and if I get this hole and just to show that, imagine that was going down through the middle of my body. This gives me a sense of alignment with the pull of gravity. The next couple of exercises, we move out of that line and back into it. And the way that we do that is by pushing the hips back. So the pelvis tilts. And you can see when I do that, my head goes forwards. My shoulders go forwards. Now to come back up to the upright position, quite often what we find ourselves doing is straining in our head, our neck, our back. But in Tai Chi, what we want to do, we use that pull of gravity on our hips to bring us back to this central line. This is all exaggerated again. And then I push up. So again, using the center, this time a vertical rotation in the center, so that the sensation in the upper body is almost as though my head is floating up. And we're going to do two exercises using this. I'm doing this quite big again, so don't feel that you have to do it this big, but do try and get that sense of your hips dropping back. For me, this is one of the most lovely things about the Tai Chi posture. And it's this ability to come to the upright position without straining against gravity that encourages a sense of movement within the body, it allows space for that flow of energy. So this time, as you push up, your arms coming up again, pushing your hips back, your arms obviously following that. This is called rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Be very careful of your knees and your back. It doesn't have to be a big movement. As I said, I'm doing these quite big, so you can see what's going on. What we're not doing is leaning forwards. If I lean forwards, I'm going to fall over. So there's nothing special. There's a door there to stop me falling. So if I want to angle forwards for some reason, there's lots of times in our lives when we want to do that, I can counter the tendency to fall when we do that, and in the end it's much easier on the back, once again by paying attention to what's happening in that central part of my body. Do one more like this. And then bring your hands in front of your belly, palm down, turn horizontally, and then push the hips back, and again hands go forward, swinging across and come back to the center. It's called polishing the table. Turn the opposite way and across. And just to show you what's happening more in my hips, I turn, push back, bring my hips across, and I drop down again in the center, and then I change direction. polishing the table. Just move as far as you're comfortable moving. And you really should feel you could have moved a little bit further. Keeping that feeling of there being space within your body to move. If we do that, most of the time, the energy will naturally develop that sense of balance and harmony that I mentioned earlier. Again, like the river, water flowing, remove the obstructions to the flow, and you don't have to make it flow. And then just come back up to the upright position and swing your arms back a few times. Give your legs a shake. We're going to change the stance now. So keep the width of your step. So starting from this position, imagine parallel lines going through your feet. Turn one foot out. Now this is an angle you can play about with, so you can shuffle that around a little bit once you're in the posture. And step straight forwards with the other leg. You can still see the background between my legs. And then, as we did before, just moving your weight forwards and backwards, giving yourself time to settle in, to get that feeling of dropping through the leg and feeling the response from your leg. Again, that sense of a push. Rather than letting it push you up, the intention is for that energy to move your weight from one foot to another. So notice whether you're straining a little bit in your shoulders. A very common habit that we have, it's a very useful habit, in fact, is when we're walking down the road or something like that, we will angle forward slightly, and that moves our center of gravity forwards, and we can swing along quite nicely. That our legs swing through, and so on and so forth. It's a very efficient way of moving. Unfortunately, the downside of that is if we lean forwards too far, then we fall over. But this is where we go back to that quality of our hips. Remember the last couple of exercises, it was our hips dropping down that brought us to the upright position. So I sometimes think of that yielding of the hips to the pull of gravity as being a bit like if I'm riding my bike or driving my car and you're approaching a junction or a bend in the road or something like that. What we tend to do is we cover the brakes. We put our fingers on or our foot on the brake, ready to brake if we need to. We don't always need to, but we're ready for that. And in the same way, as you move in this exercise, or just when you're walking down the road, eventually, as I said before, these habits flow into our daily lives. That awareness of the effect of gravity on your hips and what that means for our posture and our stability is there in the back of your mind, as though you're covering the brakes just in case. But this exercise, we don't angle for. We try and keep the pelvis level. We're not interested in speed or power or momentum for this exercise. Just whether we can get a sense of movement, transferring our weight, whilst maintaining that quality of rooting down. Easier said than done. Now go into your back foot, gently raise your front toes. More of your weight goes into your back foot. Now I've got the front foot turned out because I want to sink down in that front foot, push my back knee forwards and raise my heel. So what I'm trying to do is to maintain that upright posture much more over one leg now. What I don't want to do is this, to lean, because now I'm off again. So take a moment to settle into the leg each time. Remember, this isn't a race. Just establishing that part of your normal movement is always going to be concerned with re-establishing that sense of root, because we lose it all the time. and then eventually just stepping in. This is another one of those exercises, another one of those processes that I think is valuable to us the whole time. I've been doing Tai Chi for over 40 years. I still like to practice this basic movement. And it's still something to really try and do on a daily basis in one way or another. Partly because it kind of goes against the grain. It goes against how we habitually move. So again, we're trying to establish useful habits in our movement. Give your legs a shake. It's also a very good exercise for conditioning legs. And if you have problems with the joints of your legs, ankles, knees, or hips, it can be very beneficial because you're trying to get the weight to drop into the foot, into the ground. So there's when you start to be able to do that, you're not expecting those joints to be weight bearing. They're weight transmitting rather than weight bearing. So try that with your other foot forwards. And so just change the angle of my back foot a little bit, transferring the weight. One of the phrases used to describe this movement, always remember what I said, that actually it's very hard to get a complete description, but it's that the legs fill and empty. And that can be quite a useful image if you are trying to get your weight to flow through the joints in the way that I described. Because if you fill a glass up with water, the water drops down to the bottom of the glass and fills upwards. So our intention here is for our weight to drop into our foot initially, and then to increase moving up the leg. Dropping into the foot, going up through calf, through thigh, and then emptying again. And this is an intention, a deliberate move, a deliberate decision almost, that you're not going to stiffen up in your hips, your knees, or your ankles, but rather to let the weight drop, almost as though your legs were hollow tubes. To be able to do that consistently requires that your legs condition. The big muscles of your legs need to build in such a way that supports the joints and allows this sense of hollowness to develop. And again, this is a good exercise. Now raising your toes and your heel the way that we did before. You may find this very difficult because essentially what we're trying to do is to improve our stability, to improve our mobility, to protect the joints of the leg. Effectively, we're trying to relax them. If you're feeling a bit wobbly, or if you're concerned about your knee or something like that, it's going to be quite difficult to relax. So sometimes it's worth, if I stand here, my hands on the wall here. So I've got the security of the wall for a little bit of extra support. And it's quite interesting, even if you don't feel you need the support, it is quite interesting to do this, because we don't always realize that we're still holding on. And so it's not just about whether you feel you need it, it's worth having a go at that to enable you to really investigate this movement. And if the rooting down and the expansion upwards represents one key cycle of movement, one key cycle of energy, then the transfer of your weight from leg to leg is equally important. Stepping in. When we move from the ground, we move with much greater stability. When we use our legs to move ourselves with, our whole body with it. So once again, that sense of unity, unification through the whole body. And then stepping through. Trying to make sure the foot plants down before you transfer your weight, almost like you're walking on thin ice. And change direction. So you plant the foot down, you sort of push in a little bit to test the ice, and then feel your weight following through. Then bringing your feet down. Standing again. So that weight transfer exercise and the associated stepping actually helps us to get a sense that we can take these principles that we find in this posture and the exercises associated with it into something a little bit more expansive. We can begin to get a sense that we can move around, maintaining the root, maintaining the alignment of body. But it does require a shift in attention. And going back to what I was saying about maintaining stability, the alignment of the body. If you imagine you've got kind of a stack of boxes in front, maybe 2 or 3 boxes, and you decide you want to move them, you just want to slide them out of the way. If you push on the top box, chances are that will just stumble off, and the whole stack may just collapse, in fact. But if you push from the bottom, you're more likely to be able to maintain that stack and move all the boxes at once. So we want to move from the ground, and there's always a constant awareness. We want to try and cultivate a constant intention to do that. Now put your right foot forwards back into this, what we call the bow stance. One of the problems that we have perpetually, I think, with that idea of moving from the ground is that we're hardwired to pay more attention to the upper part of our body, especially our hands. It's why we're here. You know, it's the opposable thumb that's got where we are. So it requires deliberate, intentional effort to build that awareness of moving from the ground. And so again, it's something that we try and practice regularly, daily, so that we reinforce this idea. Now we're going to bring the hands into the movement. We're going to start with an exercise called fisherman castanet. So if I show you from the side first of all, weight in your back foot. Imagine once again you're in the water. Remember that one of the effects of that is to really help with the quality of the movement. But this time, move your weight forwards and the pressure of the water holds your hands back. And as it does, you may notice, some of you, a little bit of a kind of extension in different parts of the body, here in front of the shoulder, maybe elsewhere. And as you settle into your front leg, those areas that have extended contract, helping to bring the arms through. Going back, same idea. Flows nicely, this one. So much of the energy to move your arms comes from the transfer of the weight, supplemented by these subtle changes in upper part of your body. So we can begin to listen to the body, we can begin to observe those changes. The ones that we feel are most likely to be of use to us, whatever they actually are cultivated through our intention. So we can begin to see how what's sometimes referred to as the three jewels, the three treasures of Tai Chi, interact with each other and they're mutually dependent. The three jewels are the body, of course, and our mind, our awareness, our intention, and the movement itself, the energy. And these three things constantly interact with each other in Tai Chi. Sometimes said in Tai Chi first in the mind, but that's really about focusing attention. When we start to move like this, I sometimes think of those three treasures as being like the three legs of a tripod. I may look to emphasize one or the other points in the movement and in my practice, but ultimately they're all important. So the fisherman casting net. At the moment, we're moving forwards and backwards. We're facing forwards, so our center's not particularly turning, and our arms are swinging forwards and backwards. I'm going to change that now. As I go back, I'm going to turn towards the back foot, so you're going to turn to your left. And now, it's pretty much the same. You're bringing your hands across your body. They drop down, they just swing up through a gentle curve. And as they do swing up, just feel that little bit of expansion in the side of your body. Expanding in the left side, contracting, expanding in the right side, contracting. And then building on that expansion so that your arms come up. Turn palm up a little bit as you go forwards, curving downwards, turning so your hands are brought across your hips, expanding in the right, pushing your arms up to about shoulder height and then down. Fingers starting to trace out figure of eight on its side, a kind of rounded X. Some people like to think of the infinity sign used in mathematics and physics. Because the combination of all these different elements, the rooting down, the energy that comes from that, the transfer of the weight is one of the outcomes of that energy. Guided through the center of your body. Feeling the changes in sides and back and wherever else you know some patterns of expansion and contraction. And all those different elements, all those different energies combining with your intention to move your arms. Shake out. Try those two movements on the other side. So starting with figure of eight. Sorry, starting with fisherman casting net. Getting ahead of myself there. Never a good thing in Tai Chi. They experience this as a kind of wave-like movement through your body. This time turning. And into the figure of eight. And this time, I'm going to go forwards. If the space is behind you, go back. So I get to here. As my hands come up, my back knee bends in, my back foot comes forwards, and I step forwards. I'll plant the foot, slightly turned out, and go forwards. Same thing here. And then once I've got this part of it, I may, see how it works, find that I can just raise my knee. If you find that raising the knee up really makes you wobble around, then just keep your foot down, that's fine. But remember, the thing that really keeps you stable is that pull on your hips, allowing that to happen. I'm going to change direction. So try not to think of balance as an issue. If we can keep our body aligned with the pull of gravity, if we can keep that sense of rooting down, hips dropping and so on, then what we get is a much more stable posture. We don't have to balance in those circumstances because we've got the stability automatically. One more time. And bring it down. Rub your hands together. And then tapping them in the face. And over your head and neck. Down for one shoulder. And your arm. And the other side. And your back. This can help to just ease some of the stiffness that can build up, some of the tightness in the muscles around the hips. It's a good exercise in its own right. It does help the energy. Legs going down the outside of your legs, up the inside. And then light on your belly. And onto the upper part of your chest. The last exercise is called Embrace Tiger, Return to Mountain, because it brings us back to this basic stance that we were in right at the beginning. It's tricky business to maintain these qualities. So you may not feel that you've been particularly expansive or spacious or whatever. It's quite challenging. And now just sinking down, pushing up, and arms coming up and down, wrapping around as though they're holding the ball in front of your chest, drawing in, and then pressing down. Again, just looking for that feeling of whatever brings you back to this quality of the mountain, the stillness, the calmness, the strength, the root, all these qualities of the three treasures. The mountain can be a useful image for those, so that you just kind of mentally highlight those aspects that are most useful to you in your life. One more time. And rest. Lovely. Thank you very much for joining in, everybody. As always, if you do have any questions, feel free to email me and I'll do my best to answer them. But bye for now.